Hi, I'm Greg Schaefer, and welcome to Infosec Wrap Up for Friday, January 20th, 2023. I heard about this already from the Wall Street Journal. T-Mobile says that hackers stole data on about 37 million customers. Carrier says that addresses, birth dates, and other personal records were exposed, but not financial records. T-Mobile said in a regulatory finding on Thursday that they discovered the intrusion on January 5th, and they were working with law enforcement officials and cybersecurity consultants. They believe that the hackers had access to its data since November 25th, but that it has since been able to stop the malicious activity. Now, TechCrunch added that the hackers, according to T-Mobile, didn't breach any company system, but rather abused an application programming interface, an API. Quote, our investigation is still ongoing, but the malicious activity appears to be fully contained at this time, and there is currently no evidence that the bad actor was able to breach or compromise our systems or network, the company wrote. Here's the interesting part. This is the eighth time that T-Mobile was hacked since 2018. The most recent was in 2022. Thought LastPass was bad. From TechRadar Pro via MSM, another one, MailChimp suffers another major data breach following an employee hack. Now, apparently, MailChimp confirmed the news in a notification that was sent out to its affected customers, noting that the threat actors pulled off a successful social engineering attack against its employees and contractors, and giving them access to internal customer support and account admin tools. MailChimp said that it spotted this suspicious activity on January 11th and quickly suspended access to the affected accounts. Further investigation uncovered that a total of 133 customers were affected by the breach. Just like T-Mobile and like LastPass, this is not the first time that MailChimp has been breached. Recently, in April of 2022, the company announced that a data breach with attackers getting away with more than 100 mailing lists, and then the mailing lists were later used to target people with phishing attacks in trying to get their money and cryptocurrency holdings. With the stolen credentials, the attackers were able to access at that point in time 319 MailChimp accounts and exported, quote, audience data, including mailing lists from 102 customer accounts. From the Register, finally, ransomware victims are refusing to pay up. The amount of money that was paid to ransomware attackers dropped significantly in 2022, but not because the number of attacks fell. It's that more victims are refusing to pay the ransoms. At least this is according to blockchain research firm Chainalysis said in a report on Thursday. They estimate that since 2019, victim payment rates have fallen from 76% to just 41%. That's a significant drop. For context, that number was 50% in 2021. By their figures, total ransomware revenue fell to at least $456.8 million last year, a 40.3% drop from $765.6 million the year before. And to be fair, though, the research firm's data is estimate only. Still, sounds like a good estimate to me. From Secure World, a little while ago, on December 29th last year, the French Data Protection Agency, or authority, imposed a 5 million euro fine on TikTok for violations of the French Data Protection Act. The company was found to have made it more difficult for users to refuse cookies than to accept them, and to have not provided sufficient information about the purposes of different cookies. Again, the more that you make security and privacy difficult, the less likely that folks are going to be able to adopt it. I like to use the word frictionless, make it as frictionless as possible. Quote from the agency, during the inspection carried out in June 2021, they noted that although the companies TikTok UK and TikTok Ireland did offer a button allowing immediate acceptance of cookies, they did not put in place an equivalent button, like or some sort of solution, to allow the internet user to refuse to their deposit as easily. Several clicks were required to refuse all cookies as opposed to just one to accept them. That points to bias. The restricted committee considered that making the refusal mechanism more complex actually discouraged users from refusing cookies. This is the more friction versus less, and encouraged them to prefer with the ease of the accept all button, sort of like what we've talked about too with multi-factor fatigue. It's like, stop doing this. I just wanted to go away. I'm just going to click the button. They also found out, the agency, that the users were not informed about the purposes of the cookies. The restricted committee therefore found several breaches of Article 82 of the Data Protection Act. Little short blurb from SC Magazine. Researchers at Avast on Monday released a decryptor for the Bian ransomware that they then posted on a blog for public download. The researcher said that Bian ransomware emerged in August of 2022 and raised the threat bar by encrypting files at high speeds. The threat group performed targeted attacks in many different industries, including media and entertainment, manufacturing, and the healthcare sector. And now, as you know, one of my favorite parts of this podcast is to look at lists. So I have one here. This is from the Enterprise Times, the Security Outlook for 2023 5 trends. Haven't looked at this before. The whole idea is I'm pulling it up right now. First time I've seen it, my reaction, and whether or not I agree with it. Number one, the first key, the problem is getting worse, but how much worse? Attackers are honing their techniques. They know what technologies are out there. So I don't know if that's necessarily a trend. The trend would be the problem is getting worse. I guess they're just tacking on the question about how worse. Attackers are still getting through the gaps. Okay, I guess I could see that as a trend going forward. The attack on Uber is one example. There's no silver bullet to stopping attacks. Number three, industry is waking up to browser security. Yes, and actually, this is not an endorsement, but I have looked at this beforehand, and I like their coffee cup too. Folks like Island, who have created like secure browsers, are probably going to be, I think, out there on the forefront for 2023, because with the work at home, so many shift from the pandemic, obviously, there's so many folks that are working from home, and so much more emphasis on SaaS applications as well. Totally agree with that. Remember, one size doesn't fit all. Yes, in a way, but sometimes that regulations don't really see that. Like, for example, if you have healthcare information, you're beholden to HIPAA and high trust, and but there are maturity levels. So I think that yes, we will see the concept of one size doesn't fit all to continue to evolve, because some of the things, one of the things that I really like with banking is the FFIEC cybersecurity assessment tool, which basically, like a lot of other frameworks out there, it has a maturity model with it, different levels, 5, in fact, that you would want to achieve, but they base it on the inherent risk of the organization and actually have a nice way to figure that out. I wish we would see more emphasis on how to get to the decision that we want to do this maturity level versus something higher. And the last one here, the rise in weaponized attacks. So they're talking about template injection attacks that use weaponized decoy. Yeah, okay. So that's going to be a good segue into my last article I was going to talk about from the Hacker News. A recent study by cybersecurity experts has shown that it is possible to identify relationships between different threat actors by analyzing the metadata of malicious LNK files, uncovering information such as the specific tools and techniques used by different groups of cybercriminals, as well as potential links between seemingly unrelated attacks. Now, this is the spot in the podcast where I make a little confession. I'm reading this, and I really feel bad about this, actually, but I'm reading this, and I'm like, what is an LNK file? I feel like I should know this. Internet searching is your friend. And from fileinfo.com, they say that an LNK file is, you probably already know it, a Windows shortcut, which points to and is used to open another file, folder, or application. It contains information about the object to which it points, including the object type, location, and file name. You can create a shortcut to a file, a folder, or application by right-clicking that object and Just saying, create shortcut. So you use link files all the time. Yeah, I just forgot about it. They've been around almost as long as I have. Now, a McAfee blog noted that threat actors are using email spam and malicious URLs to deliver LNK files to victims. These files instruct legitimate applications like PowerShell, CMD, and MSHTA to download malicious files. According to researchers, one tool leveraging linked LNK files, Lion, we talked about that. They search all available disk drives from A to Z for all found drives. It then searches all files and encrypts files whose file extensions match one of the 1,013 extensions hard-coded into this ransomware's binary. So one other thought about this, they talk about the drives A to Z. We're all familiar with C drive. Do you ever think about why the hard drive is called a C drive? A lot of you know this, I'm sure. Maybe some of you don't. And I'm certainly not going to say that this is authoritative. This is just based on my experience. My first computer was a Hyundai. It was a PC clone, a 386 clone, if I remember correctly. Maybe it was a 486 clone. No, it was a 386 clone. When we say clone, we're talking about at the time, IBM was the big manufacturer of personal computers. And then you had other folks that copied the architecture. They cloned it. So we called these clone PCs. This was my first computer. I got it in college. I just loved the fact that I had a modem with it and I could connect up to the university's dial-in at 1200 baud and get to the mainframe and see my email. This is circa 1986, maybe 87. Monochrome monitor. It was amber. I loved it. It was a great little machine. 2 drives, 2 floppy drives, no hard drive at all. Everything ran off of 5.25 floppy inch floppy drives. Those drives were labeled A and B. Now, when you got to the point of installing a hard drive, what's the next letter? It's C. Most computers back then actually did have 2 drives because the disks couldn't really hold that much information. I struggle to remember what the 5.25 was. I know the 3.5 was 1.44 meg. Then you could do double density and make it 2.88. I want to say the 5.25 was half of that, so 768K, something like that. Not much to work with, right? When you're talking about now, we stick in a USB drive and it's, 64 gig, 128 gig, terabyte. It's just amazing, the amount. But that's why C is C, because A and B had already been spoken for. Now, going down the drive path, then there became the popularity of putting in CD drives, which later would become DVD. Well, you already had A and B spoken for, and you had C spoken for, so what would be the next logical? D. So most times your CD drive would be D. But what about all the other letters? And where did they come from? What were they used for? Well, that was for your mapping your server connections, your server drives. We don't really do that nowadays, but back in the day, in order to connect, like with a Novell server, you would map a drive to that share. And there was probably different ways to express that back then, but that was essentially what we were doing. And I don't really remember if there was a rhyme or a reason to it. Like maybe with Novell, we would do "and" or something like that. I seem to remember working on a Z drive. I seem to remember working on a K drive. I believe that there was some sort of rhyme or reason to that. In any case, that last article, that's why I saved it for last after the lists, allowed me to walk down memory lane with you. I hope I got most of the details right. It's as I remember it, at least. So that's it for today's wrap up of the week. We'll see you on Monday for the quick strike. Hope you have a great weekend. And as always, stay secure.